All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. We are very excited that you joined us. If you haven't tuned in, this is the show where we talk to celebrities, thought, and industry leaders to really discover their journey to success. I am super excited that you're joining us. This show is like no other. I can promise you that. You might laugh, you might cry, but you will definitely leave inspired and gain a whole new level of insight into those people that you follow, love, and admire. All right. What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. I am very excited for today. I have, joining me an entrepreneur, fund manager, someone who's also taught school in India. He's a pilot, proficient snowboarder, and really just all around amazing entrepreneur, third generation entrepreneur. I have Mr. Erik Huberman. Erik, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Love it, man. I'm looking forward to chopping it up. I've been a big fan of Hawke for a while. You guys got started right around the same time that we did and have just really built, I think, a next generation agency. And so I'm excited to walk through it and get deep. All right. So every episode, what we do is we try to break down the journey of people who have risen to a certain level of success, whether it's in media, entrepreneurship, business. And, we really like to start with the background and the backstory. So you, my friend, were born in Ojai, California, which for those of you who don't know, he can tell you a little bit about Ojai. And, really, I thought one of the things that was really interesting is, you had kind of lived in LA as well, too. But at the age of 7, I think it was, you guys made the trip up there, right, for good. So yep. Tell me, what was life like for you? Maybe just you can even go back to kind of being born in Ojai, but then living in LA. Like, what were your first, 7-10 years like for you, growing up in Ojai? And you can talk a little bit about the Oak Grove School, which I think will be really interesting for people as well.
Yeah. So first 6 years of my life were in LA. My parents were always super supportive. So I had a great little childhood up, until 6 years old living here. I started school early. I'm a November birthday and I was always the youngest in my class. So even in kindergarten, it really didn't mean anything. I remember in first grade, I was bullied a little bit, even first graders, but still teased a little bit for being the smaller kid and didn't like that. So when my parents said we were moving to Ojai, we went and we had visited every summer. I loved Ojai. We'd spend all the time in the pool, all that kind of stuff. And then we went and visited the school I'd be going to, Oak Grove, as you mentioned, and liked the kids right away. So I remember being 6 and having no hesitation. My friends in LA were cool, but whatever, let's go to Ojai. There was no attachment. So we moved. And Oak Grove is a really fascinating school. It was founded by an Indian philosopher named Jada Krishnamurti that was told when he was born that he was this next coming of some, God or something like that. And he's put on stage in front of hundreds of thousands of people at 12 years old. And he stood up there. He's like, I'm not some God. I'm just a kid. And so he ended up spending his life, dedicated to education and charity and philosophy. And so he had a lot of followers in the 70s and 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And he had a few schools in India, a school in the UK, and then he opened a school in the US called Oak Grove. And it was anywhere between 6 and 15 kids per grade, preschool through high school. Wow. So super small. I think it was 130 kids total, preschool through high school. And we, teachers called by their first name, really, they had to have certain standardized education things just by being a part of, I guess the California Education Board and et cetera. Yeah. But it wasn't, they really tried to get they were anti-competition. It wasn't about competing with other people. They were anti standardized testing, and they just wanted kids to grow up and learn. And we still learned all the same things every other school. I know that now because I talked to other kids, we read the same books, learned the same history, but it was just not as rigorous about memorization and testing. And it was a little more autonomous. And they were very supportive, kind of marching to the beat of your own drum at that school. So it was fun. It was, known as the hippie school in the hippie town. So Ojai, which is to most people known as a very spiritual hippie place that know it, I was at the school that every other school was like, whoa, you go to the hippie school. So we were like the hippies amongst hippies. It was great. No, but it was super fun. Wouldn't have traded that for anything. And, I don't know if I could live in Ojai anymore. I love visiting. My mom's still there, but my wife and I have definitely talked about like, God, it'd be great to be able to send our kids to that school. Cause we had my school experience was basically going to summer camp my entire childhood.
That's wild, man. So when you think about the, like those first years, right? And obviously, I mean, you went there from, a really unique experience, right? Same school from, basically 11 years, so as you kind of grow up in this school, are you playing sports? Are you in band? Are you a superstar, academics? What was, think of like high school, and again, going to high school like this has got to be kind of wild too, right? Like, tell me a little bit about that, like that period of life for you as you're kind of like starting to kind of probably become more aware too of just how hippie this school is and your place in it.
So high school was fun. We had 42 kids in the high school when I graduated. So, that's
insane, man.
It's insane. My senior class was 11, 3 girls and 8 guys. And so, as a high school age kid, coming into your own, trying to meet girls and that whole thing wasn't a thing. There were 3 girls in our grade.
They're just like, can these guys please just stop hitting on us?
I remember one didn't really, there were 3. One didn't date, one dated my best friend, and one dated a guy 2 years old. Like that were the 3 girls in our class. I still remember that. And I'm still in touch somewhat with all of them, not mostly one, but the other 2 a little bit. So, that part was funny. I was, again, a head shorter than everyone. I was 5'2" my junior year of high school. So, and I'm 6 foot now. So I was, I played sports. I was active, but never good. I think you mentioned snowboarding. That's one of the reasons I think I gravitated towards that is it wasn't about anyone else. It was just competing with myself. And I started snowboarding when I was 11. But I was, I'd mountain bike. We'd go camping. I was really into video games. It's a small town, not a lot to do. So my junior and senior year of high school, I'd basically go to school, then go to work for I'm trying to remember, I think 3 or 4 hours after school. And I think 4. And then I would go home and play video games until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, go to sleep, wake up at 7. Oh no, sorry. I was going to the gym then. So I'd wake up at 5:30, go to the gym, go to school, go to work, play video games, and sleep literally 2-4 hours a night, and then would take naps throughout the day during class. So
what were you doing for work? What was your dad was an entrepreneur, your grandfather was an entrepreneur. So I know you kind of come from those chops as well.
Well, that side of the entrepreneurship started early. Like at 6 years old, I grabbed a bunch of stuff around my family's house and decided my dad and mom didn't need these things anymore and went door to door selling my parents' things without asking them. Small town was safe. So with my buddy, and we'd go, 5 cents for this golf ball and 10 cents for this light bulb. Like, literally, that's the stuff. I was like, they have plenty. I'll sell some of this. Didn't like that. So then just when I was 8, I grew up wanting to play guitar. So you mentioned music. I grew up thinking I was going to be a musician as a profession. And so I wanted an electric guitar. The only other person that named Erik that I knew of was Erik Clapton. So I was like, got to be like him, got to get a, Fender Strat. I went to my dad and said, hey, can I have an electric guitar? And he said, yeah, sure. Go get a job. It's like, okay. So I started selling lemonade. I think I earned $7 the first day. I was like, wow, this is going to take way too long. I got to figure out a better way to make money. And so I still remember all this. So I started buying and selling Beanie Babies because I saw that these things were getting really hyped up. And in that year, or probably
on eBay, are you flipping on eBay? Is that what you're doing? Or I
think I was. I remember that, but I don't know. 8 years old, that was, or I think maybe 8 or 9. That was what I'm 86. So 95 was eBay around because I remember eBay. It was either that I was selling in something because I remember meeting people to sell them. People would buy it on either online or I'd sell in the classified section or something. But I was selling, I was selling these things. You buy them for $5 and I was selling them for 50, 75. I had one that sold for $450. So I ended up making $4,000 as an 8 and 9 year old. Flipping Beanie Babies on the weekends, and bought my guitar, which was actually only $150. But then I bought a BMX and I saved some money for a car, and I liked that. So then going back to high school, I started my first job was for one night in a restaurant where I was a busboy, and the next day I broke my arm. And so they wouldn't let me bus anymore. Turns out you're not allowed to fire someone for breaking something, but they did. And so
you've learned that now.
Yeah. And then worked in a health food store for basically my junior year of high school. And that was a great lesson in why I never wanted to work for someone again, while also love the store, by the way. It's still there. It's called Rainbow Bridge. The ownership's great. The general manager was great. The problem I ended up in was my manager, the guy I worked directly for, so not the GM, but the guy under him. I started at minimum wage, went in there, and they told me, I knew it was standard that at least in 6 months, I'd probably get a raise. So I worked, and I loved working, and I really liked people. And they even taught me this there. I hated stocking shelves and recording inventory, but if I could work the cash registers or the deli, I had a lot of fun. And, but I was always down to do whatever they needed me to do too. 6 months in, I was training people at the cash register and helping people learn the way and learn how to stock and learn all these things. And somehow, it just came up. I don't even it wasn't a prying thing because I never really bothered it. But someone mentioned, I think I was getting $6.75 an hour, and someone goes, "I'm only getting paid $9 an hour for this," and I'm training the person. I was like, wait. What? So I walked into the GM's office. I was always super comfortable with this and said, "Hey, what's the deal here?" And long story short, it turned out my manager had been taking credit for all my work and telling the GM I was doing nothing for 6 months, and telling him that he was talking to me, which it never came up to me. And he's like, yeah, he's saying that he's having to stock the shelves and he's having to do this. And I'm like, but I do all that. What are you talking about? It's on camera. And I realized at that point, the way I was going to advance in that job was not to do a good job. It was to play politics. And I pretty much lost taste for ever working for someone again. Because I was like, I want to make money because I deserve to make money, not because someone thinks I deserve to make money. And so, yeah, that was my high school job. Stopped, finished my senior year, went through it, and then graduated, got into Arizona August before my senior year, University of Arizona. I committed to it and was like, all right, well, I guess I'm in college now, and so I had terrible senioritis, barely paid attention. I think I got suspended 4 times senior year.
For what?
I drag raced my best friend in the parking lot of the school and outruns our physics teacher, and just does this and both thumbs down. We're like, oh, that's not a good hand gesture. We were drag racing in the parking lot of a school, so it's probably not the best. I broke into our library because we used to hang out in it, and that's where all the couches and computers and internet was.
Right.
And a girl I had dated that we always had friction. She got angry at me about something and came in with a cup of tomato sauce and tried to throw it at me. And I hit it out of her hand, and it spilled everywhere. And literally from then on, and we cleaned it up, but someone told on us. And so they decided they were shutting down the library going forward during lunch hours, which I was like, well, that's BS. That's the only place I like to hang out. So I got caught climbing through the skylight, breaking into the library to open it up for everyone else. Because I was still the little guy. So they boosted me up on the roof. I opened up the skylight. I jumped down. The librarian's standing right there as I jumped through the skylight onto a top of a bookshelf to jump down. And I watch all my friends. She's staring at me like this. I watch all my friends run behind her out, bolt. I took the fall.
I was never there. This is all Erik. I don't know how he got up there.
Yeah, exactly. So
yeah, this is interesting, man. So again, you've got these kind of rebellious streaks. Where do you think, and even just understanding, where do you think this comes from? Or where do you think kind of this drive? Again, you and I talked before. I know that you're we talked about your grandfather owned a scrapyard, and your dad took that business and did some really interesting things. Do you where do you feel this independent spirit? Maybe that's a good way. Maybe that could just be the nature of the school came from.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think my mom was incredibly supportive and always she was proud of me to do. I think to the point I'd roll my eyes. She was, no matter what I tied my shoe, she was proud of me. She was always proud of me. So it gave me all the confidence. And then the school was basically anti-authority. They didn't make us. Most people are brought up, calling their teachers Mr. and Mrs. from preschool, and being, it's all about respecting authority and following authority. And that's great if you want to raise a worker bee. They're going to follow authority. Every company needs people that are going to work, but it's not how you raise an entrepreneur. In this school, I'm not saying that it spits out an exception. It actually, percentage wise, it probably spits out an exceptional amount of entrepreneurs, and not because of the sex appeal of entrepreneurship, like you get at sort of the, prep schools, but because so many kids are just why are things done that way? That doesn't make sense. Why should I listen to you? Why should I do this? And that is consistent amongst most kids there. They don't just follow authority because they're not taught to.
Right.
They're taught to question. They're taught to ask questions. And most teachers there love it. Some teachers get really bent out of shape. I definitely overwhelmed a teacher or two while I was going through that school.
I can relate. Yeah, I can relate. Yeah. So how did you choose U of A? Out of all the schools, in California and elsewhere, and your experience, like, how does U of A land on like the one?
Yeah, so I'm 16. It's August of 2003, so before my senior year. And we had a family friend that went to U of A, and my mom's like, well, why don't you go visit? Like, and I was talking to a college counselor outside of my school that I was like, I want to go to business school. I want to go someplace that, maybe close enough, but far enough. Like, I don't want my parents just dropping in on a whim, like LA, but I'd like to be able to come home if I want to. Things that you think are priorities when you're 16. Turns out you can fly wherever, but that's what I was thinking through.
Sure.
And she's like, well, University of Arizona is a top 20 business school. It's, close but far. And then it's like, well, our family friend had a friend that was like 3 years older, so wasn't that close to him, but knew who he was, that was going there. And he's like, come out and visit. So my mom and I went out there for a weekend for the U of A LSU game as school started back in August, and went out to Arizona during an LSU U of A game, went to a pajama party at U of A, which is not what you would think. And at 16, I'm like, I'm going here. This is a good, apparently there's good academics, but this looks amazing. Like, you go from being in a small town with nobody. And truly my thought was, my graduating class is 11. I never struggled academically. Like, school came really, really easy for me. I never had to pay attention, and I got good grades. And so going to college, I was like, I don't want to go to Ivy League. I don't want to go to grad school. So like, I don't need that good of a college. I want a good college because don't want to waste my time, but I'm going to kind of, for the social aspect, I'm going to spread my wings, learn how to, interact with people, meet people, that kind of thing. And U of A, every time I mentioned it to someone when I was applying, was like, oh, that's a fun school. It's like, all right. So that's why I went. And honestly, it was a great choice. Don't regret it. Not because it was just fun, but because I needed that.
Yeah. And so obviously, and I know that you worked throughout college as well too. Yeah. So obviously, you go for the social aspect. What were those kind of college years like? I know that you worked at Vector Marketing. Like, I know a lot of salespeople kind of cut their teeth at Vector. And
it's incredibly valuable. Like, Vector Marketing, I tried to push my brother to do it. He didn't. My brother's doing fine now, but he's 9 years younger. So he's in real estate now. But early on, I think if you want to learn sales skills, like, doing that for a summer, there's nothing better in terms of just a crash course in sales. But yeah, I worked in a real estate office. My thought around working in school was, I want to go get a job that's going to teach me something that's either going to help me figure out what I want to do long-term, or give me a skill that I can carry with me with whatever I do. So I thought real estate. So I worked in a real estate office after my freshman year. Didn't really like it, but I was okay. Sophomore year, wanted to work in sales, tried to get a job as a used car dealer because I heard that was like the toughest sales job, and no one would hire me for 3 months. And then I got a Vector Marketing, Cutco sends out letters saying, recruiting tens of thousands of college kids. I don't even know what the number is. It might be hundreds of thousands every summer. Oh, yeah. So like, they hit the perfect guy that was like, I was looking for a sales job, and they sent this letter in the mail. It was just like serendipity. I was like, done, signed up, all in, took their trainings, took it seriously, and ended up crushing all their records for the summer. And so they offered me to run an office in Central California, San Luis Obispo County. And they promoted me. They flew me to Vegas. They flew me to Olean, New York, where their factory was. They were, sending me around. I ran their Pasadena office for the month of, like, basically my winter break, and was training. With school, during school, like, when school was in session, I didn't have a job except for this. Like, that was my junior year. Junior year, I was flying around and stuff, but most of the time I focused on school, having fun, still played video games, and was always competitive. I was actually pretty competitive. In high school, I was ranked 3 in the world on Warcraft 3, which was now you're a multimillionaire. Back then, you don't talk about it. And so I was into it, but then I joined a fraternity, had a ton of friends, went out a lot, partied a lot, that kind of stuff. Like, just had a very, like, other than maybe the video game part, but had a very like movie-esque, like, typical college experience. Like, U of A, we went out every night except for Mondays, because Mondays were the night we took off. But every other night we had either a bar we went to, or we would go to a house party. There were pool parties every single Saturday. Like, it was nuts, but fun. And I went during the Gronkowski era. So Gronk, we'd go, all the stories of him in college were while I was there too. So ran into him every weekend somewhere.
That's got to be wild, man.
Yeah, he's
That's
nuts.
Gotta,
yeah, it was fun.
I can imagine like Gronk, like U of A Gronk in particular, and
I'd say it's exactly the same. Is actually
so it's kind of what I figured.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's probably
it's
like
not
the
that
same.
he's not worse or better. It just seemed like, from what I've seen, I haven't hung out with him in forever, but
yeah,
it seems the same.
Yeah, that's funny, man. And but going back to Vector, like what, here you are, you haven't really done like some, you've had these kind of various roles, but not like sales roles, right? What was it that clicked for you? Like obviously to go from, kind of just starting this, going through training to being somebody who's a top performer and training all these offices. What was it? Like, what do you think separated you?
Yeah, a few things. One, fully committed. Like I wasn't ever questioning. They did everything they said to do. So I was just like, okay, this is the program. Let's run it. Like I like to work. So it was never an issue. I also grew up with my dad. I'm the oldest. My dad made his success as I grew up. So like born in an apartment, grew up to the point where, ended up with a frankly very successful family. And he was so concerned I'd be a spoiled rich kid. It went the other way where he was pretty tough on me. And my dad had a short fuse with me as a kid, not in terms of anything violent or abusive, but just like angry or yelling, or I'd get a different answer depending on how I asked something. And I've reflected on this a lot. I do believe that my dad is super sensitive with word choice and with how you word something. Like if I said, I want to go to a friend's house, it'd be like, are you fucking telling me what you're going to do? What do you mean you want to go to a friend's house? And then if I said, hey, Dad, do you mind if I go to a friend's house? Yeah, sure. No problem. It was literally those little nuances made the difference.
Yeah.
And as weird as that is, I think that taught me so much about sales because those little word choices and nuance and communication are the difference between getting a deal and not.
So spot on, man.
And so
spot on.
I honestly think through his volatility, I learned a lot of sales skills. And then I followed their program. I read their scripts. I studied everything. I ran the program they said to. And I didn't just do it for the sake of doing it. I understood why. So when they said, and this is where you tell them the price. Well, why now? Why not before? Why didn't I say the price when we started? Oh, I understand, because you want to demonstrate the value before you get to price. Like I actually understood why they had you do these things. And so, or I'd ask if I didn't. Yeah. And again, no fear of authority. I had no problem talking to my manager and being like, wait, why? Why do I do that? Let's talk about like, what's the reasoning behind this? Why can't I do it this way? And then frankly, I did it, for those 3 months where I made mistakes and tried to run my own course and watched how bad things happen when I tried to redo it my own way and just get pushy or whatever it was. So developed my own sort of sale. I don't want to say culture, but my sales persona where it's like, I don't like being pushy. I just like demonstrating value and asking for the sale, and that's it. And I found that developed a lot of trust. And so learned that quickly.
There's so many lessons there. And I think for a lot of people who are in sales or even people not in sales, right? They think sales is like natural, like, oh, it just comes easy. And there definitely are parts of like, from a personality standpoint that, can make people maybe have a gear to be able to get to be an A player, but so much of sales is a process. And I think for those both not in sales and in sales, it's a really interesting, again, there's micro nuances around how you phrase something. And, by saying it this way, it makes you 5% more likely to get something done. I think that those are the most underappreciated parts of sales. And I think particularly today, where I think people many times want to feel like, again, sales is, it's all about relationship building and those things, which isn't like foundation. That's like untrue where, of course you want to do that, but the process, the script. And I had a very similar moment when I was 26, very successful in sales early on. And I had a boss. I was the second to last person to sell something. And he's like, I listen to your calls. My boss's boss. He's like, I listen to your calls. And why aren't you reading the script? I'm like, the script, Erik. I'm Jake Dunlap. I don't follow scripts.
Yeah.
And he's like, he has a company called Career Builder, right? Which is a big job site back in the day. And he goes, Jake, do you think we train 1,000 people on this script because we're stupid? And I'm like, no. And he's like, then just do it. He's like, why wouldn't you? And so similar to your story of falling on your face for a few months, like, I'd fallen on my face for about a month and a half, 2 months. Then I closed 60,000 in new business next month. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my, it was like the most, like, again, I can still tell that story so vividly because I remember it was like such a light bulb moment of like, whoa,
When as a young person, you don't realize like how much money and time and effort and thought has gone into that script. You're just like, oh yeah, like they know anything. And then it's like, oh wait, no, they,
I know how to.
Huck was a multi-billion-dollar knife company training college kids to sell knives. And by the way, I never really questioned it. I just got to the point where I got cocky, where I was like, I'm selling like crazy. I don't need a script. And then I was like, oh wow, I'm not doing as well anymore. I should get back to that.
Go back to it. Yeah, go back to it. So you graduate.
Yep. One thing happened actually before that. The next summer I was supposed to open San Luis Obispo. A month before I opened that office, got a call from a friend that said, hey, I've done a lot of research. California passed a law that you have to filter your storm drains now if you own property.
This is the stormwater maintenance company.
Exactly. Asked me if I'd join him because he's like, sales and marketing. And which again, I was 20 years old and was like, I know what? Okay. And so I bailed on opening that office and I helped the transition, but I was like, I'm not doing this, which definitely pissed off my boss at the time. But I remember sitting with him at a diner. It was April. I was supposed to open in May. I came into town and I sat down with him in person because I felt like the right thing to do and said, so I'm not going to be doing this. And he said, I wish you understood the meaning of commitment. And I'll never forget that because it cut a little deep. It was like, oof, that's where you went with that. But I'm still in touch with him. He's a great guy. That was that.
Man. But I bet that carries with you, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, when you think about people.
Yeah. I'm actually someone that really is a man of my word, but I also know that and I watch it with my own employees, like at the end of the day, you do have to make the right choice for yourself. And you can't, I didn't screw him over. I knew, I even talked to him about it. The person just north of me and just south of me could easily move their lines of their borders and take over my territory. I'd prepped everything. So it was like, I'm not leaving you in the lurch here. You're still going to make your numbers. I just am not going to be the one to do it. So I was confident in that. And I know they ended up fine. But and so I went and helped with this storm drain company. I was, I wrote our legal contracts by stealing an alarm company contract and rewriting it to be our own, and just figured it out, and then got our first client, got chased off properties, called con artists, all sorts of things that you get to do when you're trying to start something that's literally a brand new industry. And the end of summer came, we had our first contract, and I decided, I was getting pushed to drop out of school, maybe pursue this. It was this was 2007. So it was Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, he dropped out of Harvard and blah, 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 blah. And it was I'm not going to filter storm drains the rest of my life. So I don't think I'm going to do that. This has been fun. I learned a lot. I owned 50% of the company. I was like, we never put it in writing because I knew the guy. And I was like, you keep it. I'm going back to school. If you need help, call me. Maybe I'll rejoin you after I graduate. And he turned it into a multi-million-dollar business. He did well. I did not rejoin him though. So so I go back to school, finish my senior year, graduate. About February before graduation, I started going, I should probably figure out what I want to do with my life. And real estate came up for me again. And my dad was in the waste business. His dad owned a junkyard. He ran the waste for LA, Oxnard, Sacramento, Fremont, basically coastal California, and then used that to get into commercial real estate. So I grew up in high school. I'd go every Wednesday afternoon. My two best friends and I, it was not high school, I think it was senior year. We'd go work at my dad's office with his head of real estate development, and he'd teach us what a cap rate was and what a ROI was and these concepts. So we loved it. We loved the numbers. We were, 16, 17 years old, learning things that you usually can't get access to. And so I was like, I want to get back into that. But I knew, based on the relationship with my dad, especially at the time, it was volatile. So I was like, I'm not going to work for my dad, but I'm going to go get into real estate and still, he always had my back, but I knew that we'd butt heads if I actually joined him directly. Sure. So got a job in real estate, got my license, became a commercial real estate agent. And I started exactly a week to the day before the entire banking industry collapsed and Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, et cetera, 1 week to the day after I started. So it's a good time.
What else is on the table for you? In terms of graduating, were there other options for you or
that's great question. This was 2008. So 2008, nobody was hiring anyone. 2007 is when things started to collapse. 2008 is when they really collapsed. So I went to our job fair, and the people hiring were Edward Jones to be an entry level, wealth advisor. Sure. Target to be a manager, and PetSmart to be a manager. And I remember being using a lot of swear words because I was like, this is what I went to college for. Thank you, Arizona, 4 years in college and I can be a manager at Target. Are you fucking kidding me? So, so that was So that's why I went to the real estate thing, is like, I don't mind eating what I kill. I was confident in my own sales ability and had access. I knew that, you know, I felt good about using my dad's connections if he had some, or just grinding, because I also liked hard work. So I was,
Right.
I was excited about it. And I remember I went to Men's Warehouse and bought 3 suits because you had to wear a suit every day to work. And like,
and I bet it was buy one, get 2 free.
Yeah, it was something like that. It was, I mean, I think I spent $150 total for like dress shirts, ties, suits, all of it. Yeah. And, went and started, and I was the first one in the office. They gave me a key. So I literally turned the lights on in the morning, and I was generally the last one out because I felt like that's what I wanted to be, the grinder. And funny enough, so I sat in a cubicle. There was and the 2 guys in front of me, the guy right here and the guy like sort of diagonal, were guys like 2 years older than me, that they had been there a little while. And they were the only other 2 good spirited guys, because none of us, we were all too young to know what a bank or a economic collapse was. We had no idea. So everyone else is miserable. Yeah. We're all positive. And Matt, who was like diagonal from me, we used to play pranks on other agents. We used to have fun with it. And still one of my closest friends to this day. We're going to dinner tonight, actually. So that was a great relationship we built out of it. But I would say like 6 months in, I was looking at it going, I had made no money. I had $35 million in listings because, again, I was grinding. People were down to sell if they could get the price they wanted, but nobody was getting a single offer in late 2008, early 2009.
I remember, man. Yeah, I was in Phoenix. I was in Phoenix at the time, and it had just imploded. Yeah. And I was young, 26, right? And I'm in the job space, right? In 2000, I'd started Career Builder in 2006 and was there 6, 7, 8, 9. And I think that's it though. Early on, like, again, I think that there's a beauty to it. Cause again, I was in Phoenix. I didn't really know about the financial meltdown, and like, okay, yeah, less people are hiring. Okay. Well, how do we flip this into something else? And I think that, and a lot of these, like those experiences teach you how to get creative, and how to position things specifically. And so you're there for a bit, and then how long are you doing real estate for before you decide to kind of think about your own thing?
So I was doing it. I did it for a year fully, but 6 months in, I got a call. We were at 6 months in. Actually, my friend Matt and I started playing with ideas of like, we still own it, the domain name, letter R Talk. We're like, we're going to build a real estate website. We're going to get in this internet thing and We still own the domain name. I think we bought it for $400, split it $200 each. And like, it was a huge amount of money back then, but now we just sit on it. And then we had all these other ideas. And then I got a call from a friend's dad around April. So it was about 6 months in. And so he said, "Hey, Erik, been admiring you as a, young budding entrepreneur." So his son was the drummer in my band in middle school and high school. So I played guitar, but I realized I wasn't that good. So I didn't pursue it. And his son was my drummer. His son had pursued music professionally and was a struggling artist. And he's like, "This just doesn't make sense to me. I think we can harness the entrepreneurial spirit of musicians and help them focus it. Do you have any ideas?" I'm like, "I'll go put a business plan together and figure it out." Thank you, Arizona. The one thing I really did learn there academically was how to write a business plan. Sincerely, they did a great job teaching me that. So I went and put a pretty robust business plan together around business coaching for musicians and brought it back to him. And he said, "Yeah, this looks great. I'll circle back with you. And you should read this book." It was still my favorite book, Appetite for Self-Destruction by Steve Knopper. Okay. It's basically the perpetual appetite for the music industry to self-destruct, meaning they never seem to want to adapt. And it's like a whole lesson in adapting to change, where it's like they fought when everything was on records and they went to tape. Everyone was like, "Screw that." And they fought it. And then all the record companies went out. It's just like over and over again what happened. It was like Napster was a good example, et cetera. So, he disappears. I go heads down in real estate again. We had a really big real estate auction, July 31st, 2009. And I had all my listings ready and we were going to auction them off. And this was going to be finally where I'd make a little money. And I had made $350 so far in that year because I did a broker opinion of value, meaning I gave my opinion of the value of a property to a bank that was selling, trying to see if they'd repossess it. So $350 in, a year in, a lot of debt. Sitting on credit cards because I still had to pay for my living in LA. And he calls me right before the auction and goes, "Hey, Erik, so I've raised us $1 million. You're going to run the company. You're going to get 5% of the company and we're off to the races." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Let me finish this auction and we can circle right back." Go and do the auction on July 31st. No one showed up. We had like 3 bottom barrel bids for one of the 7 properties I had. Nothing sold. I didn't even go back to the office after that day. I went to this auction at some hotel. I don't even remember where it was. Didn't go back to the office, called them. I'm like, I'm in. I got minimum wage, which was better than what I had made for the past year. And I ran that company for 2 years, started building it, found a developer, built out this website around, again, it was like the original masterclass for music business, basically.
Fame Wizard.
Yep.
If you're looking, you can find it on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But not live anymore.
Correct. So, and that as a story. So yeah, I built it for 2 years, had 15,000 artists on the platform. It was profitable, but it was never going to be that big. It's a hamster wheel. Most struggling artists are struggling because they don't want to work. Just to be honest.
Right.
There's a minority that are hardworking, and I have all the respect in the world for. The majority are not, and the minority don't have a lot of money. And we'd have a lot of people that come in and like we'd tell them all the things they need to do to be famous, which is a lot of work. And they'd be like, yeah, I don't want to do that. And they'd quit, or they wouldn't be famous in 2 months and they'd quit. So it was a hamster wheel of a business to like keep people in. And so after 2 years of it, I was like, this is never going to be that big, and decided to move on. And at the time, I forgot to mention my friend's dad. I didn't know anything about him professionally until this. Turns out he was on the board of Men's Warehouse, had another nonprofit with Deepak Chopra, had helped found pay-per-view, like just a crazy resume. And so that's where he would easily raise the money and all that.
Right.
His network was pretty crazy. So also he brought an incredible amount of like music executives and big artists and celebrities that were a part of Fame Wizard and helped us build out the curriculum, and were coaching and helping do talks and stuff. And so he also, the guy that was running his nonprofit, I became friends with. Turned out we worked at Cutco at the same time. I had met him, but we don't remember because he ran the Vegas office when I visited Vegas, but we just were like, yeah, we probably met. And so he told me he wanted to move over to work with me on the music thing. We decided he would take over and I would leave. And so he took over and ran it for 3 years profitably. And I went off and, this could be a lot longer story, but basically I started a t-shirt subscription company called Swag of the Month with a next door neighbor that knew the t-shirt business, had a college friend build a little one-page site that sent off to PayPal to subscribe. And we got an insane amount of press through a quick tip that I got that just was like, send them the headline they want to write about. Like TechCrunch wants to write about fundraising, so just tell them you raised some money. Doesn't matter if you did; they're not going to double check. So
I love it.
Yeah, so we did that, and we got into every publication we could want, like Maxim, Huffington Post, Wall Street Journal, TechCrunch, Thrillist, etc. And so it was off to the races. So we built that for a year, sold it. And this could be a lot longer story, but I'm just also watching the time.
No, man, this is good. This is what it's all about. It's about these years, man.
And what was really crazy about that business, we got to a point where we had to sell or raise money or shut it down because we didn't have the working capital to scale it. And so my partner and I were working 18, 20-hour days every day, but didn't have enough money to hire someone else. We had no financing either. And we were like, I was 24 years old at the time. I was like, no one's going to give me anything. I went and tried with VC. Nobody knew how the VC, not nobody. There weren't podcasts and tons of articles about how the VC world worked. So like I pitched one VC, a guy named Howard Morgan, who started First Round Capital. He's a legend in the VC space. Yeah. By the way, awesome guy, but he had just invested in a company called Fab.com and said that he couldn't invest because there could be some conflict. Fab.com ended up being a $500 million loss. Yeah. But that was his reasoning, which made sense. And I respect it. And I've seen him a bunch of times since. And so we started, so I went back to my partner. I was like, well, we got to either sell this or shut it down. We had randomly met someone that had an e-commerce holding company that was our age. And she called, that was a Thursday, I think. Was somewhere around, like say Thursday, Friday. Tuesday calls me and goes, have you thought about selling your company? It's like, maybe.
I mean,
and he's like, well, how much would you want for it? I was like, and I literally did the math. So went from real estate to Fame Wizard minimum wage to Swag of the Month minimum wage. I had some debt. So I looked at my debt. I doubled it because I owned 50% of the company. I was like, this much. And she's like, yeah, okay. Come pick up a check if you want to transfer it. She trusted me. She's like, pick up a check. I'll just pay cash and I'll take it over. And then I'll call you if I need anything. Literally that night, drove down to her place, wrote me a check, put it in the bank, gave her all the access, and she called me a couple of times with some questions, and that was it. The stipulations were I couldn't say who bought it, and I couldn't say for how much. So I was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. So I paid off my debt, gave my partner the other half, And that was a really interesting time, which this up until COVID, I will say, most stressful few weeks of my life, because it's really interesting. So I actually, right after that happened, I went on Birthright. I had scheduled going to Israel. If you don't know, or I know you do, but a lot of people don't know, you get a free trip to Israel as a Jew between 18 and 26 years old. And I was 25, almost 26. So I was like, well, I got to take advantage of this now, or I don't get to do it. Signed up. I came back. My roommates had changed our lease to be up in 3 days instead of a month and 3 days that I thought I'd have. And I had just sold a company and I paid off all my debt, which meant I had no job and I was flat broke.
You still have no money.
Yeah,
but
I have zero. I'm not negative anymore. I'm just at zero, which means I'm broke with no cash flow. So I start applying for jobs and trying to scramble. Ended up staying with a friend. And within 3 weeks, this was like a big turning point for me. I didn't know my value. I had built a couple little startups. The only reference I had other than like friends and stuff like that were like what's in the news and my dad, who, at this point was flying private and having a great time. So I'm like, have I done anything? And in 3 weeks at 25 years old, I got offered to be the head of business development at Live Nation, the head of e-commerce at Warner Music, and to join as a consultant at a little incubator in Santa Monica called Science, all offering me six-figure salaries. And I was like, used to making minimum wage, scrounging by. And within 3 weeks, I'm like, oh, I guess I'm rich. Like, holy shit. So, much to my parents' disappointment, because they're being conservative for my sake, we're like, well, you're obviously going to work at Warner Music or Live Nation. I was like, no, this incubator thing sounds cool. I like startups. They're all paying me the same. Seriously, big part of the decision. I lived in Santa Monica. Science was in Santa Monica. Live Nation's in Hollywood. Warner Music's in Burbank. I want to stay in Santa Monica. So took the job at this incubator that had just launched a startup called Dollar Shave Club. And said, I think that's much more interesting. I like this e-commerce thing, et cetera. Hadn't really honed in on my own. Like I was still trying to figure out, am I music? Am I fashion? Am I like, what is my personal brand in that sense? And when I joined there, it became pretty clear that it was e-com. So I advised for Dollar Shave, advised for this portfolio of e-commerce brands, and ended up helping one of them pivot from a vitamin company to a women's activewear brand. And over the course of the year, within 6 months, we were doing $500,000 a month in revenue. And scaled that. Again, I want to make a long story short. They ended up making a lot of operational mistakes and trying to vertically integrate, blew all of their cash, and ended up struggling, having to lay off people, even though it was a rocket ship. And I ended up helping them sell it. I had, through my networking, met a guy that owned a massive activewear manufacturer, helped them sell it to him. I bailed. He asked me to join him to work for him. I said, no, but I'll consult 1 day a week. He said 3 days a week. I said, fine, but you got to pay me, I think it was 200 an hour? It was 100 an hour. And he was like, which is 200 grand a year basically. And I'm making 100 at the moment, just to be clear. So I went from 100 grand a year. So I said, you have to pay me 100 an hour. And so he's like, fine, but you have to work 3 days a week. And so then I did the math. I'm like, wait, I'm going to make more money working 3 days a week for this guy than I made full time at this. And now I have another 4 days a week to do whatever I want to do. So then I started advising and consulting for other brands. And through that 6 months, I started to build a tea company, a fitness and health tea company.
Okay.
That was going to be my next thing. And I was advising for all these brands because I liked the idea of not burning my own cash and paying the bills. And I was making good cash. And I kept signing more and more clients. And the first one that after him, the first guy that asked me like, hey, will you just advise for me? I'm like, sure, $1,000 a month. He's like, no problem. I'm like, shit, too easy. Second one, it was like $2,000 a month. No problem. Too easy. Third one, I was like, $3,000 a month. He's like, okay, fine. Perfect. $3,000 it is. I still want him to say yes, but I want him to hesitate a second. So that became my pricing. I'll advise and do like outsource CMO work for $3,000 a month. And by November, I had hired an assistant. I had named
2014, right?
2013. This is 2013.
Okay.
I had named it Hawke Media because I had no plan on building anything there. I was just like, I'm consulting while I build Shape Tea, was a tea company. I have an assistant now. And two things happened. One, I kept trying to hire agencies or individuals for these companies and found that like 99% of agencies and marketers out there are full of shit and have no idea what they're doing. And the few that are good are expensive or want long contracts or are hard to attract or something else, agency or in-house. And so it was just a cluster. And also I had planned a 3-week trip to Thailand at the end of 2013 for New Year's. And I knew that if I left, my clients would not be paying me vacation days and they may not ever come back because I would set them up for success. And so I was like, this could be really bad. So I ended up going, well, how about this? I'm going to hire a small little SWAT team. They're going to work with these clients on all the things I've been trying to find agencies to do anyways. So I'm going to hire a few people with the income I have. And at this point, I'm making 30 grand a month as a 26-year-old, or turning 27. And I was used to making 3 grand a month. So I was like, not spending it. I was like, I'll just hire a few people, use this money for that. And maybe we'll build, and then maybe that team will become my tea company team as that launches. So I hired a few people. I grabbed the guy that was running the music company. I was like, we were right. It's been 5 years. That thing's never going to be big. Shut it down. Come join me. And he did. So he shut it down. He became my head of operations and like my client facing person, and then brought on a few more people. And over time built out this team that, or not over time, quickly built out this little SWAT team, and then went to the clients and said, hey, it's all a la carte, all month to month, but now we have an email marketer, Facebook marketer, et cetera. Set up what I needed to leave, went away for 3 weeks, came back. And that's what we call kind of the first day of Hawke, was January 13th, 2014, came back and really started to lean on it, put some goals together, and launched the tea company. The tea company did about 30 grand in revenue in the first 2 months. Hawke did 60 grand month one, like 65, let's say month two, whatever it was, started to scale. And I'm like, yeah, screw the tea company, shut it down and started focusing. And that was the beginning of Hawke Media.
Yeah. And I don't think, I mean, look, I ran into Hawke, I think for the first time in 2015, right? Because, I started scaled, I think it might've been January 13th in 2013. So a year before. And so, I think it was really, what I thought was novel that really bucked a trend was everyone in this kind of marketing world, right? It's like big retainers, commit to the people without really, and you know how it is, any agency, you're only as good as the people that you get on the team. But you went the other way. Like you were like, look, here are the experts that you need, right? You got a CMO, a social, an email marketing, a performance. What was the allure for you, or what did you see that made you think, like, what if we were more flexible here? Because I think it would have been really easy to not do that, and to not be flexible and to want that locked in. What was it that you saw that led you to like that initial business model?
Running my own brands. I hated how agencies worked. I was frustrated with agencies like anyone else. Like, wait, you want me to give you a year contract and we've never done anything with you? Like, you want to get married and not date? Like, that's what you're asking me to do. And like, okay, so I'm going to work with you. Like, that part really pissed me off. And that was something everyone did. So I was like, not doing that. The idea of like, why aren't any agencies client centric? It was always this pretentious vibe of like, we only take the best clients, or we only take the best clients. We only take big contracts, whatever it was like, this just seems backwards. Like every other industry I know is client centric, customer centric. And this is all about what the agency and their pretentious ass wants to be, or they're the beggars, the people that can't get any business. So they'll take whatever they can get. So it's like anyone good seems to get pretentious, or you're dealing with shitty operators that like the cheap ones are pretty bad at what they do. So it's like, there's gotta be a solution here that things can be accessible, but also really great. Meaning like, and so our mission statement to this day is accessibility to great marketing for everyone. Like, how do we make it super accessible and nimble and flexible to work with great marketing talent? And to me, it just seemed like, why doesn't this exist? It's dumb and it's frustrating.
Yeah. And I think, and I think over time, your kind of hypothesis proves out where, churn is, much lower than what you would, think, what a lot of people would think. And I think that's what people fight against, right? It's like, if we lock them in, then they're there. But to your point, it makes the barrier to entry, or, the ability to earn trust, again, like so it makes the sales motion a lot harder.
But it's like, as an agency owner, I'd love annual contracts. It doesn't seem very good for my clients though. And as a guy that ran e-commerce companies, I never had anyone sign a contract to buy a pair of pants from me a month for a year. Just, they might prepay it, but they're never going to sign a contract.
That's
so
right.
It's like, I don't need contracts. Just give them good service, good product, and it should work. And thankfully, that is how it has worked out.
So what were the early years like? So 2014, this thing starts to go, right? So 2014, 16, 17, I think, I kind of was first introduced to Hawke. I want to say around 2016, 17. Yeah. And it was like, wow, like this thing is really moving. Cause I was like, wow, they've grown revenues, amazingly. I know around that time too, you're named Forbes 30 under 30. So that's got to be, kind of a good, kind of validation of
early 2016. Yeah, I would say one of the biggest focuses I had for the first years was credibility. Like we had to show that we were credible, and it's really hard in that landscape. And so every little piece of press, every client we could talk about, every case study, every award really mattered in the early days, because that was where we got our validity and people could trust us to actually, like, we have no barrier to entry. It's a month. So as long as we gave enough trust that, like, you can trust us for a month, nothing's going to happen. That was the big hurdle to get over, so to speak.
What were the early days like for you? Like, what were some of your biggest takeaways from those early days, or kind of biggest lessons learned from the first 3-4 years?
Still to this day, the biggest lesson I've learned is it's summed up in I'll try to make it a quick story, but a good story. I had an employee on a Monday morning, got an email at 3 a.m. that said, "Hey, Erik, long story short, I fell in love, asked her where in the world she wanted to go. She said, Hawaii. We're here now. I'll be working remotely." Month into business, this guy managed half our revenue, and we were not a remote operation. So I was like, I'm sorry, what? So can't get a hold of him because it's Hawaii and it's 3 hours earlier. So around noon, I think he finally answered. And I was like, hey man, like I knew if I went off on him, he would just, it wasn't going to go well. So I was just like, just please handle your stuff, have fun in Hawaii, but please make sure you're on top of your things. He's like, of course, I'm working remote. We'll be good. Next day, I get a call from every one of his clients saying, what the hell are we paying you for? We haven't been able to get a hold of this guy. He said he'd have this delivered, blah, blah, blah. And like every one of his clients, meaning half my revenue is furious. And I'm looking at maybe losing half my business, which would not be good. We were nowhere near a sturdy place that would work out very well. And so I try to call him, can't get a hold of him. Around like 3 p.m. Tuesday, he finally answers. And I'm like, hey man, what the fuck? And he's like, Erik, I'm going to stop you right there. This is the happiest day of my life. I'm getting married and I need you to just respect that. And he hangs up on me. And I was like, all right. So I look at Tony, my partner, the guy that ran the music company. And he's like, I guess I'm going to go learn how to do email marketing, Tony. And he goes and starts reading blogs we used Bronto to do it.
I love it.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I'm like, all right. And then I forgot when I had to go somewhere. So I leave. I called my dad. And I was like, telling him a lot more elongated version of the story, a lot more detailed, not rushing through it. It took about 5 minutes to tell him the whole story. And his response is, oh yeah, that shit happens all the time. Anyways, I got to run. Talk to you later. Quick.
And you're like,
and I'm panicking. So I'm like, I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do. Like my business. Oh my God. He's like, yeah, it happens all the time. Still to this day, the most important, I think, lesson any entrepreneur can learn. Yeah, that shit is going to happen all the time. You run a business, you're always going to be putting out fires. And we started, it took a couple of years to really, after that, to settle in, maybe even 3, because I remember a conversation with Tony, my partner, about like Tim Cook running Apple, like they're dealing with geopolitical problems, trade wars, COVID, Amazon, like antitrust law, whatever. Like the problems just get bigger. They never go away.
That's right.
There's no finish line. And we used to be like, as soon as we fix this, then it'll be good. As soon as we fix it. And I think a lot of people fall into like, they think that when they fix that next big problem, it gets easy. Never gets easy. Something's always going to fuck with you. So like that to this day is the most important thing, because it actually caused me, we've been offered some significant acquisition offers. And that I'd say that lesson caused me not to take them, because if you don't have that mindset that this is what you signed up for, you're looking for a finish line. And if you do, if you're like, hey, every day you turn on your computer, there's going to be some other crazy fucking thing in your email, some lawsuit, some this, some that. That's running a successful business. When it happens, you're like, yeah, okay, this is what happens.
Exactly.
You prep for it. Your emotional volatility goes away. You're just like, oh, so this is the next thing? Cool. Like you're waiting for it. It's expectations versus reality thing. So when I accepted that, it just became way more fun, because then nothing stresses you out anymore. And even like COVID, when it hit, like we used to joke that with our business, because we're very cost effective, we're very nimble. In a recession, we're probably in a pretty good spot, because we're actually the cost effective way to get things done versus the big agencies. And we're like, the only way that we're ever going to have any problems is if like the whole world freezes or shuts down. I didn't think that was actually a possibility until last year. And so yeah, then the whole world shut down. And for about 2 weeks, I'd say for the weekend, I pretty much didn't sleep. Nobody had, a plan or a scenario set for what to do if your revenue goes to 0 or what, you know what I mean? It was just like, what do we do? And so went through that, started to figure out a plan, and then came out of it. But after a couple of weeks, I remember realizing, oh, this is just the next thing. This shit happens all the time. This is the next one. This is the thing we have to figure out. And then it just became a lot more proactive. Like, okay, so this is the next thing you're going to throw at me, whoever you are. The universe, yeah, the universe, exactly. Let's go figure it out. And we did really well. partially because of luck, because of the industry we're in, but also because unlike a lot of our competitors, we leaned into it. We hired. We didn't fire anyone. We went full on the attack. We went for, a lot of sales effort and marketing effort. We did everything we could to retain our clients, and we leaned into it and came out really strong, because I was like, either that happens or the whole world's collapsing, and who gives a crap anyways? Like, if that's actually what's coming, what I do right now doesn't matter. So let's just lean into it and go for it. Because if it works, awesome. And if it doesn't, we're probably in a lot bigger problems than, I spent some time on my business that didn't work out. So
yeah. And I think it's, man, what a great lesson. I think it's that acceptance. And I'm smiling because, as someone who runs a successful scaling people business, it's so true. It's like, God, I could just imagine like the anger you would almost get at like, oh, how did it? And then it's just like a moment. And I think it's just like, maybe it's just, you see enough cycles of like it all working out, where finally you're like, yeah, okay. Oh, wow.
Or it doesn't. I mean, that's the thing that you like, entrepreneurs especially tie their like own personal health and life force to their business. And like COVID forced me to go like, what is the worst case scenario? This goes to zero. I'll be alive. I might have to change my lifestyle a little bit, but I'll figure it out and I'll build something new. Like, that sucks. I don't want that. But is that really, like, my life isn't being actually threatened right now? And I think that's hard for people to come to terms with. But I also personally like being adaptable and like trying new things. So it's not the scariest thing in the world.
That's right. All right. So last question here as we wrap up is, you work in the marketing, ecosystem and world. You've got a great network. When you think about marketing over the next 3 to 5 years, what are some of the trends that you're most excited about when you think about what marketing is going to look like? And a lot of my audience is B2B in particular, but I want you to kind of give the B2C lens as well. Like, what are the big things that you think, the trends that you're most excited about as you look forward?
Yeah, I think this sort of DR short-sighted type of marketing is going to get very difficult. I think that with the iOS changes with Facebook, I think with the competition moving so hard into digital because of COVID, things accelerated 5 years, that I think building a brand, building content, building a great, customer relations, a great life cycle marketing strategy, I think that's going to be so much more critical these days. We're dealing with it right now with clients that refuse to do email marketing and SMS and those things, that now Facebook just doesn't work. It went from being not as good to like, you're screwed if you don't do this. And I think it's going to be, I think it's great, because I think the cream will rise to the top. I think it's going to be a little bit of a day of reckoning for the person that just knows how to pull levers on Facebook.
Yeah. I think that concept of brand, that as the mechanisms we used to use to get that direct response become more difficult, brand cuts through. Yeah. And it's like what I saw happen in marketing is like, it was all brand. Then we got marketing automation and fancy tools. And then it went all direct attribution. And now you're starting to see that kind of like, oh, wait, maybe this was not the right. So I love that. So Erik, look, I want to say a big thank you. Thank you for joining me. This is a really fun conversation. I think there's a lot of takeaways for people here around just persevering, moving to the next thing, not being too held to the next thing, letting the next opportunities come. And as I think as you reflect on this story, there's just that next opportunity. If you're putting in the work, you're learning the skills, it just happens. And I know that sounds like a shitty way to think about managing your life or career, but you never know when it's going to happen, good or bad, but you continue to put yourself in those positions. And Erik, it was a ton of fun, man. I really enjoyed it.
No, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next week on the Jake Dunlap Show. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to another extremely fun and interesting episode. I thought it was fun and interesting, so I hope you did too, of the Jake Dunlap Show. Really great, just breaking down everything that makes people who they are, the success, the trials and errors, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite platform, and make sure, more than anything, to go over to jakedunlap.com. That's where you're going to stay up to date on all the latest guests, additional details, prep notes. We're going to be sharing everything on jakedunlap.com. So go ahead, go over there. You can subscribe there as well too, and we will see you next week on the Jake Dunlap Show.